So today we're going to be doing a video on verbal abuse, and you know that point in your life where you know that something's wrong and you head to YouTube or you head to Google and you're like, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with my relationship? Well, when I was at that stage of my relationship before I got divorced, one of the things that I happened upon was the verbally abusive relationship. And I read this book by Patricia Evans, and if you haven't read it, it really is amazing, especially if you're interested in the field of narcissism and codependency, because it's invaluable. It really helps you understand the effects of being verbally abused. And if you're in a relationship with a covert narcissist or an overt narcissist, undoubtedly a toxic person, you are being emotionally abused and verbally abused, and essentially language is being manipulated to cause you psychological battery. One of the crazy things about verbal abuse is that when you're being verbally abused by someone, they tell you that you're crazy. They tell you that they're not abusing you, which is what researchers call crazy making. So I feel like you're abusing me, right? But you deny that you're abusing me. And in essence, you're denying my ability or my right to feel the consequences of your actions, because verbal abuse is an assault. It's not cool, it's not funny, and it needs to stop. So I want to describe, which I think is brilliant. I wrote down in the margin some of the things that Patricia Evans considers verbal abuse, and they are angry outbursts, cool indifference, one-upmanship, witty sarcasm, silent withholding, manipulative coercion, unreasonable demands. Sound familiar? Because I don't know about you, but I live this way. My norm, living with this type of stonewalling, living with this sarcasm, and then being told, oh, you're too sensitive. Don't you love that? So when there is verbal abuse, there is also this, what's wrong with you? I didn't mean it. You take things way too seriously. You should lighten up. You know what? You're just a little too tightly wound. You know, when you are a victim of verbal abuse, your partner doesn't admit it. It seems so obvious to you that you're being verbally abused, but your partner or your mother, your father, your sibling, your coworker, your friend, they don't admit that they're verbally abusing you. And then if you're a rational person, especially if you have high empathy, you're highly forgiving, and or you have codependent traits, then you think it's you. You think, well, I just have to communicate more effectively. I remember thinking, I just have to say it different this time. If I can figure out how to say it, then he'll see it. Then he'll understand that he's hurting me, with this sarcasm, with these backhanded compliments, with these insults that I'm crazy and I'm a wacko and I'm such a negative person, right? He did not see any of that as abusive. And here I was stuck thinking that if I could just find a way to help him understand that what he's saying is abusive, then he'll stop. That was my thinking. And it was the wrong train of thought. It kept me stuck for many years. And it also caused me to doubt my reality, because I thought that it was me. I just wasn't communicating this idea that he was being verbally abusive well enough. Verbal abuse doesn't happen out in the open. Verbal abuse happens behind closed doors. And then the verbal abuser, the abuser is denying that there was any verbal abuse. And so what ends up happening is you are doubting your reality, and then you can also feel embarrassed or ashamed, because on the outside, this abuser could be so nice to other people. And for some reason, you just tick them off. And it could be a female or a male. This is not just a male problem. There are plenty of females that go off. There are plenty of females that are verbally abusive to their children, to their friends, to their neighbors, to their whatever, to their spouses. This is not a male issue. And it's very important that we don't say that this is just a male issue. But generally speaking, verbal abuse is not something that happens in the middle of a church gathering, right? And so it will cause the victim of verbal abuse to doubt their reality, to doubt their worth, and to fill with shame it also makes you feel very insecure, and it destroys your self-confidence. Verbal abuse is about dominance, and it's about exerting control over their partners or the people that they're dealing with. So someone who is verbally abusive has to feel like they're one up. They have to feel like ahead of you. And so they're not vulnerable. They're not comfortable being vulnerable. Vulnerability to somebody who needs to one up you is terrifying, or it is all about pain, right? So there's no pleasure in having a heart-to-heart conversation with you, trying to get to know you, letting you get to know them. No. Verbally abusive people use dominance in their relationships to control you. Somebody who trivializes what you're feeling. That's stupid. That's ridiculous. I don't know why you think that way. You're being trivialized. You're being told in a roundabout way that what you think and what you feel is stupid, and you shouldn't feel that way. And in addition, what you're feeling is so stupid, and I'm superior to you because I have the right, for some reason, to tell you that what you're feeling, your feelings are irrelevant. There's a great quote in her book, and it says, "Yelling at living things does tend to kill the spirit in them. Sticks and stones may break our bones, but words will break our hearts." And this was a quote by Robert Fulghum. And so, most of us, she goes on to say that most of us are aware that name calling, is a form of verbal abuse. But most verbal abuse is actually secretive. Usually only the partner of the abuser hears it, and verbal abuse becomes more intense over time. The partner becomes used to and adapts to it, and verbal abuse takes on many forms and disguises. Verbal abuse consistently discounts the partner's perception of the abuse. And so it's so important that those of us who come from verbally abusive homes, or those of us who have verbally abusive partners, it's so important that we recognize that this idea that sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never harm me, is a lie. Because you know it and I know it. When someone uses verbal insults at you, it hurts your heart. It goes back to us wanting and to feel connected to other people. And when you're highly codependent, what other people think about you is really high in the list. What we want to do is we want to move into a position of power where we are recognizing abuse for what it is. And in that space, what we do is we acknowledge how what this person is saying makes me feel. So we hit the pause button. We stop. We hear the abuse. How is this making me feel? Because what happens is we go into a shame spiral. So someone says that we're crazy. Someone says that oh my God, I used to hear all the time, like, I never said that. I heard you say that. And now you're telling me you didn't say what I heard. So crazy making, because I was insulted the first time you said that thing about me, right? And now I feel that, and now I confront you, and now you say that you never said it. And now it's like a double layer, like a double whammy. Now it's like, you're denying me the ability to experience my experience, which is such a mind screw. You do that to somebody consistently over time, and you're like dribbling, and it's not your fault. So, I'm just going to read her evaluation. So the following evaluation is designed to help you determine if you are experiencing verbal abuse in relationships. Place a check next to the statement which are true for your relationship. He seems irritated or angry when you several times a week or more, although you hadn't meant to upset him. You are surprised each time. He says he's not mad when you ask him what he's mad about, or he tells you in some way that it's your fault. Number 2, when you feel hurt and you try to discuss your upset feelings with him, you don't feel as if the issue has been fully resolved. So you don't feel happy or relieved, nor do you have a feeling that you've kissed and made up. He says you're just trying to start an argument, or in some other way expresses his refusal to discuss the situation. Number 3, you frequently feel perplexed and frustrated by his responses because you can't get him to understand your intentions. Number 4, you are upset not so much about concrete issues, how much time to spend with each other, where to go on vacation, or etc. as about the communication in the relationship, what he thinks you said and what you heard him say. Number 5, you sometimes wonder what's wrong with me. I shouldn't feel so sad or bad. Number 6, he rarely, if ever, seems to want to share his thoughts or plans with you. Number 7, he seems to take the opposite view from you on almost everything you mention. Can you stand it? And his view is not qualified by I think or I believe or I feel, as if your view were wrong and his were right. Number 8, you sometimes wonder if he perceives you as a separate person. Number 9, you can't recall saying to him, cut it out or stop it. Number 10, he is either angry or has no idea what you're talking about when you try to discuss an issue with him. So she goes on to say, verbal abuse may be overt, such as angry outbursts directed at the partner or an attack along the lines of, you're too sensitive, or it may be covert and hidden, as in the case of, I don't know what you're talking about, when in fact the abuser does know. Covert verbal abuse is subversive because of its indirect quality. It is a covert attack or coercion. This kind of abuse has been described as crazy making. It is a form of interpersonal interaction that results from the repression of intense aggression and which seriously impacts its victim's capacity to recognize and deal with their interpersonal reality. This is by Bach and Goldberg, 1974, in the paper they wrote, page 251. I love the work of Patricia Evans because it helps someone who feels like they're crazy, right, because of covert abuse or overt abuse, understand that what's wrong is really abusive. You know, one of the things that I discover in my programs and coaching people one-on-one is it's so sad, you know, and it's this idea that we don't have a right to say, hey, knock it off. We don't have a right to say that was abusive. We sometimes come from homes where we have been so denied a reality. We have been so abused in childhood, we suffer from CPTSD, or we were just ignored. You know, love was withheld. That we struggle with our interpersonal perceptions. Like we struggle to believe that what we think and feel is valid. And so when we grow up and we have these adult relationships, and so oftentimes if you come from a dysfunctional home, you're a pattern for a dysfunctional toxic relationship. Not your fault, dear one, but this is just the way it works because the nature of reality is holographic. You're going to manifest what you experienced in childhood. That is not your fault. We've got to get to the root cause of what is causing you to tolerate verbal abuse, or what is the root cause of attracting someone into your life that is narcissistic, or what is the root cause of your codependency. It's so important because once you figure that out, you can free yourself. So if any of this resonates with you, please know that the first step in healing from verbal abuse is acknowledging that you have been verbally abused. When we are not getting smacked around, and some of us are, domestic violence, and usually somebody who is going to be domestically abusive, they're verbally abusive first, right? So the verbal abuse comes first, and then the physical abuse comes after that. And that's really important to recognize. And so it's not cool to live with somebody who discredits you, who minimizes you, who marginalizes you. This is all a form of verbal abuse. This is using language against you. You can use language in an overt way or a covert way. But when we're dealing with verbal abuse, there's this need to dominate and control the other person and to minimize their ability to stand on their legs and pin the tail on the donkey. If you're a victim of verbal abuse, if you come from a dysfunctional home, if you were raised by parents who were dysfunctional, if you didn't see your parents argue, if you saw hostility, if you saw abuse between your parents, right, then you are tuned up for this type of abuse. You won't be able to, unless you recognize it, be able to acknowledge this is abusive. If you come from a home where boundaries were ignored, and so like your mother was verbally abusive, if your father was verbally abusive, or they were verbally abusive towards one another, you don't know, wow, this is abusive. It is your norm, and that's not right. That's not right. And we as adults have to recognize this isn't right. Please don't do what I did and what so many of my clients do. We wait for the person to abuse us to agree. It's not going to happen. You have to recognize how you feel. And if you're not happy and you don't feel safe and you feel like you're in a toxic relationship and you think you're being abused, please do not wait for this abusive person to agree with you. It's not going to happen. How you feel is enough. Recognize that your reality is real and work on setting boundaries. Work on, in my opinion, what I did for myself and what I do with my clients is I go back to why. I want to know why you attracted this, why you stayed, why it was difficult for you to hold on to your reality. I'm very interested in the why. So, recognize your reality is real. Set boundaries and do whatever you can to heal the patterns that tuned you up to be verbally abused in the first place. Namaste, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Lisa A. Romano. I am the creator of the 12-week breakthrough coaching program, the Law of Attraction Master Class, Loving the Self video and meditation program, and the Breakthrough Warrior membership site. I create programs for adult children of alcoholics, adult children of narcissistic parents, adult children who grow up feeling invisible, who feel unworthy, don't know how to set boundaries, and are struggling with a sense of self. My coaching programs serve people who grew up feeling like their worth was outside of them. And what my programs do is my programs help them find their worth inside of them. We turn you back to love, the love that you are. You get to work with me and my team for 12 weeks on Facebook and inside the member forum. Keep the program for a minimum of 3 years and recycle through the program at least 3 times the first year, twice the second year, and once the third year. Remember, it's all about healing programs. It's all about changing patterns. It's about neurological wiring, right? Your brain is wired for this. You don't know any other way. You have to know that your brain is going to avoid pain. And if standing up to a verbal abuser is your brain considers that pain, it's going to flee from being able to set a boundary. It's not you, dear one. It was never you. It was just your programming. At your core, you are divine and you are enough. Namaste, everybody. Until next time, bye for now.